Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back. This is the Let's Read series. I'm picking up the slack, sort of, because I've been out of the loop with this series for a little bit. Not the series really, but with this book in particular. I've read the book about technocracy last week or so. I did another chapter or two. But I haven't touched this one since like 3 months ago, or I don't know, 4 months ago, something like that. It's the book about Skull and Bones, and I figured I need to really start getting on shit. So here we go. This is going to be America's Secret Establishment, an introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones by Antony C. Sutton. Chapter 5. The title is, What Organizations Has It Penetrated? The Order has either set up or penetrated just about every significant research, policy, and opinion-making organization in the United States. In addition to the church, business, law, government, and politics. Not all at the same time, but persistently and consistently enough to dominate the direction of American society. The evolution of American society is not, and has not been for a century, a voluntary development reflecting individual opinion, ideas, and decisions at the grassroots. On the contrary, the broad direction has been created artificially and stimulated by the order. Not all organizations know they have been penetrated or used for another purpose. It's a situation very much as Quigley, see page 30, found in The Group. Quote, there is an inner core of intimate associates who unquestionably knew that they were members of a group devoted to a common purpose and an outer circle of a larger number on whom the inner circle acted by personal persuasion, patronage, distribution, and social pressure. It is probable that most members of the outer circle were not conscious that they were being used by a secret society. Therefore, our hypothesis number 2 is the order has penetrated or been the dominant influence in sufficient policy, research, and opinion-making organizations that it determines the basic direction of American society. The order is the original impulse. One observation is that the order gets the ball rolling in new organizations, i.e. puts in the first president or chairman and the ideas, and then when operations are rolling along, often just fades out of the picture. Among universities, we can cite Cornell University, where Andrew Dixon White, in 1953, was its first president, and Johns Hopkins University, based on the German educational system, where Daniel Coit-Gilman, 1952, was the first president. Among academic associations, the American Historical Association, the American Economic Association, the American Chemical Society, and the American Psychological Association were all started by members of the order on persons close to the order. These are key associations for the conditioning of society. The phenomenon of the order as the first on the scene is found especially among foundations, although it appears that the order keeps a continuing presence among foundation trustees. It does more than just be first where money is concerned. It stays around to keep an eye on the expenditures. The first president of the Carnegie Institution from 1902 to 1905 was Daniel Coit Gilman, but other members of the order have been on Carnegie boards since the turn of the century. Gilman was on the scene for the founding of the Peabody, Slater, and Russell Sage Foundations. McGeorge Bundy was president of the Ford Foundation from 1966 to 1979. The first chairman of an influential but almost unknown organization established in 1910 was also a member of the order. In 1920, Theodore Marburg founded the American Society for the Judicial Settlement of International Disputes, but Marburg was only president. The first chairman was member William Toward Haft. The society was the forerunner of the League to Enforce the Peace, which developed into the League of Nations concept and ultimately into the United Nations. In United Nations, we find, for example, that Archibald MacLeish was the brains behind the constitution of the UNESCO organization. We find the same first-on-the-scene phenomenon in, quote, think tanks. In 1960, James Jeremiah Wadsworth set up the Peace Research Institute. In 1963, this was merged to become the Institute for Policy Studies, along with Marcus Raskin, who had been National Secretary or National Security Council aide from 1961 to 1963, to McGeorge Bundy, a very active member of the order. By the way, just to roll it back, when I was reading a little bit earlier and I mentioned dates like 1953 and 1952, I got caught up there. Those are not dates. I think those are references to page numbers or something else, but those are not dates, so don't excuse me for that. Moving on. A key penetration in the Union Theological Seminary, affiliated with Columbia University in New York. This seminary, a past subject of investigation for communist infiltration, has close links to the order. Henry Sloane Coffin was professor of practical theology at Union from 1904 to 1926 and president of Union Theological Seminary, also known as the, quote, Red Seminary, from 1926 to 1945. Union has such a wide interpretation of religious activity that has or used to have an atheists club for its students. Henry Sloane Coffin Jr. was one of the Boston Five indicted on federal conspiracy charges. And this is only part of the order's penetration into the church. I skipped a sentence at the beginning of this. Sorry. Let's go back and read that. About 2% of the order is in the church, all Protestant denominations, although the percentage has declined in recent years. Okay. My apologies. He has a very odd writing style. So I'm tripping over it a little bit here and there, but I'm getting a little more used to it as we go on. Let's continue. The major establishment law firms in New York are saturated with the order. In particular, Lord Danelord, dominated by the Lord family, already discussed. Also Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett, especially the Thatcher family. David, Polk, Wardwell, and Debevasi, Debevoise. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Plimpton, the Rockefeller family law firm. There has been a significant penetration into communications. Some examples. Henry Luce of Time Life is in the order. So is William Buckley of National Review. And Alfred Cowles, president of Cowles Communications, Des Moines Register, Minneapolis Star. And Emmert Bates of Lytton Educational Systems, plus Richard Eli Danielson of Atlantic Monthly. Russell Wheeler Davenport, Fortune. John Chipman Farrar, Farrar, of Farrar, Straus, the publishers. The most prestigious award in journalism is a Nieman Fellowship at Harvard University. Over 300 were granted from 1937 to 1968. The first director of the Nieman Fund was a member, Archibald McLeish. The oil companies have their links to the order. Members Percy Rockefeller, the Paynes, the Pratts, all linked to Standard Oil, Shell Oil, Creole Petroleum, and Sociny Vacuum also link. That was Socony. A wide variety of manufacturing firms have members in the order, from the Donnelly family in Chicago, printers of the official airline guide, and other references. Lumber companies like Weyerhaeuser, Weyerhaeuser, who is also a trilateralist. Dresser Industries, and so on. A dozen members can be linked also to the Federal Reserve, but one appointment is noteworthy. Perry J, Pierre J, Jay, whose only claim to fame in 1913 was to run a private school and be an obscure vice president of Manhattan Bank, yet he became first chairman of the New York Federal Reserve, the really significant reserve bank. This is the area where the order has made headway, with names like Taft, Bush, Stimson, Chaffee, Lovett, Whitney, Bundy, and so on. It will take a separate volume to cover this story, and in Memorandum 9, we describe just one example, the Bundy operation. And that was written under, it's called The White House, Politics and Government. Okay, that was chapter 5. That was chapter 5. Oh, okay, 6 is only 4 or 5 pages. We can read this too, no problem. Man, this is so... It's a difficult read. Like I said, his style is so like, I don't know where his sentences are going to end and where they're going to begin, and we'll get through it. Okay. Chapter 6, Operations of the Order. In 1981, The Anglo-American Establishment by Carroll Quigley was published in New York by a small anti-establishment publisher. Quigley was formerly instructor at Princeton and Harvard, and then professor at the School of Foreign Service, Georgetown University. The publisher notes in his introduction that Quigley had been unable to find a major publisher for the manuscript. This is not surprising. The book blows the lid off the British equivalent of the Order. The Anglo-American establishment has nothing at all to do with the American establishment, which is hardly mentioned, but it has a lot to do with the British establishment. The publisher probably inserted the word American into the title to enhance marketability in the States. Quigley describes in minute detail the historical operations of the British establishment, controlled by a secret society and operating very much as the Order operates in the United States. This is the real significance of Quigley's explosive book. The Group. The British secret society, known as the Group, or just plain US, capital U, capital S, was founded at Oxford University, much as the Order was founded at Yale University, but without the Masonic mumbo-jumbo. As we noted in Memorandum 5, the group operates in a series of concentric circles, and like the Order, consists of old line families allied with private merchant bankers, known in the U.S. as investment bankers. Bearing in mind the proven existence of the group, the operations of the Order, and the kind of penetration it has achieved cannot be explained by mere chance or coincidence. By examining the Order's operations, we can generate a picture of its objectives without access to any internal constitution or statement of objectives, even if such exists. It may only be word of mouth. That's a really bad time to get a call. 1 second. My apologies. Life happens. Where were we? Okay, here we go. By contrast, the group's objective is recorded in Cecil Rhodes's will. It was, quote, the extension of British rule throughout the world, the perfecting of a system of emigration, emigration, from the United Kingdom, and of colonization by British subjects of all lands wherein the means of livelihood are attainable by energy, labor, and enterprise. And the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. End quote. The objective is, of course, ridiculous and somewhat immature, but no less ridiculous and immature than the New World Order objective of the Order. Yet the group has controlled British policy for 100 years and still does. Both the group and the Order have been created by Anglophiles who want to pattern the world on a Hegelian Anglo-hybrid culture, where the Latins, the Slavs, and the Sino races fit is not considered. But clearly these cultures will be disinclined to become pawns of either the British Empire or New England Yankees. Even within the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of nations, it is unlikely that Canada, Australia, and New Zealand would accept the constitutional bondage envisaged, ENVISAGED, by Cecil Rhodes. Both secret organizations overlook, and there is a philosophic basis for this neglect, the natural right of any ethnic group, be it white, black, or yellow, English, Slavic, or Latin, to develop its own culture without coercion. Unlike this author, Quigley sympathizes with the ends of the group, although he terms their methods despicable. Both the group and the order are unwilling or unable to bring about a global society by voluntary means, so they opted for coercion. To do this, they have created wars and revolutions. They have ransacked public treasuries. They have oppressed. They have pillaged. They have lied, even to their own countrymen. How have they done this? Modus operandi of the order. The activities of the order are directed towards changing our society, changing the world, to bring about a new world order. This will be a planned order with heavily restricted individual freedom, without constitutional protection, without national boundaries or cultural distinction. We deduce this objective by examining and then summing up the actions of individual members. There has been a consistent pattern of activity over 100 years. Part of this activity has been in cooperation with the group, with its parallel and recorded objectives. Now, if, for example, we found that the dominant interest of members was raising ducks, that they wrote articles about ducks, bred ducks, sold ducks, formed duck studying councils, developed a philosophy of ducks, then it would be reasonable to conclude that they had an objective concerning ducks, that this is not mere random activity. Historically, operations of the order have concentrated on society, how to change society, in a specific manner towards a specific goal, a new world order. We know the elements in society that will have to be changed in order to bring about this new world order. We can then examine the order's actions in this context. More or less, these elements would have to be education, how the population of the future will behave; money, the means of holding wealth and exchanging goods; law, the authority to enforce the will of the state. A world law and a world court is needed for a world state; politics, the direction of the state; economy, the creation of wealth; history, what people believe happened in the past; psychology, the means of controlling how people think; philanthropy, so that people think well of the controllers; medicine, the power over health, life, and death; religion, people's spiritual beliefs, the spur to action for many; media, what people know and learn about current events; and continuity, the power to appoint who follows in your footsteps. Operations in each of these areas will be detailed in subsequent volumes. For example, in the next volume, The Order Controls Education, we will describe how Daniel Coit Gilman, president of Johns Hopkins University, imported WUNDT, psychological methods from Germany, then welded education and psychology in the United States, established laboratories, brought these educational laboratories into major universities and generated hundreds of PhDs to teach the new educational conditioning system. One of the first of these John Hopkins doctorates was John Dewey. The result we well know. The educational morass, M-O-R-A-S-S, of the 80s, where most kids, not all, can't spell, read, or write, yet can be programmed into mass behavior channels. The order's next move was to control the foundations. They got all the big ones: Carnegie, Ford, Peabody, Slater, Russell Sage, and so on. That's the topic of another volume. As in education, the modus operandi of the order was to get in first and set the stage for the future. The initial objective was to establish a direction and an organization. Selection of managers, intuitive or amoral enough to catch on to the direction. Okay, let's go back. Selection of managers, intuitive or amoral enough to catch on to the direction, kept the momentum going. In the case of foundations, the order has usually maintained a continuing presence over decades. When it comes to activities by individual members, at first sight, the pattern is confusing and superficially inconsistent. Let's give some examples. Andrew Carnegie profited from war through his vast steel holdings, but under the guidance of member Daniel Coit Gilman. Carnegie was also an enthusiastic president and financial backer of the American Peace Society. This is seemingly inconsistent. Could Carnegie be for war and peace at the same time? The League to Enforce the Peace, founded by members William H. Taft and Theodore Marburg, was promoting peace, yet active in urging U.S. participation in World War I. How could the League be for war and peace at the same time? In the 1920s, W. Averell, A-V-E-R-E-L-L, Harriman was a prime supporter of the Soviets with finance and diplomatic assistance at a time when such aid was against State Department regulations. One second. Okay, I am so sorry. Where were we? Right. At a time when such aid was against State Department regulations. Harriman participated in Ruscombe Bank. So this is all one word all together in all capital letters. Ruskombank. The first Soviet commercial bank. Vice President Max May of Guaranty Trust, Guaranty Trust, dominated by the Harriman Morgan interests, became the first vice president of Ruscombe Bank, in charge of its foreign operations. In brief, an American banker under guidance of a member of the order, had a key post in a Soviet bank. But we also find that Averell Harriman, his brother Roland Harriman, and members E.S. James and Knight Woolley, through the Union Bank, in which they held a major interest, were prime financial backers of Hitler. Now our textbooks tell us that Nazis and Soviets were bitter enemies, and their systems are opposites. How could a rational man support Soviets and Nazis at the same time? Is Harriman irrational, or is the inconsistency explainable? The Bundy family, we have a memorandum on them later, gives us another example of seeming inconsistency. William Bundy was with the Central Intelligence Agency for a decade. McGeorge Bundy was National Security Assistant to Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. So the Bundys presumably support U.S.-European policy, which is pro-NATO. Yet the Bundys have been linked to activities and organizations which are anti-NATO and, indeed, pro-Marxist. For example, the Institute for Policy Studies. Are the Bundys inconsistent? Among individual members of the order, we find a wide variety of publicly proclaimed beliefs, ideologies, and politics. William Buckley periodically chews out the Soviets, yet on the other hand, member John Burt, B-U-R-T-T, has been a member of a dozen Communist Front groups. Member William S. Coffin, Jr., spent 3 years with the CIA and then became a leader of anti-Vietnam War activity through the National Conference for a New Politics and Clergy and Laymen Concerned. Spent 3 years with, I got lost again, I'm sorry, with the CIA, and then became a leader of anti-Vietnam War activity through the National Conference for a New Politics and Clergy and Laymen Concerned about Vietnam. In fact, Coffin was one of the Boston Five charged and indicted for conspiracy to violate federal laws. And, of course, W. Averell Harriman is elder statesman of the Democratic Party. Quite a mixture of beliefs and activities. Do they reflect inconsistent philosophies? How can the order have a consistent objective with this potpourri of individual actions? Okay. The answer is they are not at all inconsistent, because the objective of the order is above and beyond these actions and, in fact, needs these seeming contradictions. The state is absolute. How can there exist a common objective when members are apparently acting in opposition to one another? Probably the most difficult task in this work will be to get across to the reader what is really an elementary observation, that the objective of the order is neither left nor right. Left and right are artificial devices to bring about change, and the extremes of political left and political right are vital elements in a process of controlled change. The answer to this seeming political puzzle lies in Hegelian logic. Remember that both Marx and Hitler, the extremes of left and right, presented as textbook enemies, evolved out of the same philosophical system, Hegelianism. That brings screams of intellectual anguish from Marxists and Nazis, but is well known to any student of political systems. The dialectical process did not originate with Marx, as Marxists claim, but with Fichte, or Fichte, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Fichte, and Hegel, in the late 18th and early 19th century Germany. In the dialectical process, a clash of oppositions brings about a synthesis. For example, a clash of political left and political right brings about another political system, a synthesis of the two, neither left nor right. This conflict of opposites is essential to bring about change. Today, this process can be identified in the literature of the Trilateral Commission, where, quote, change is promoted and, quote, conflict management is termed the means to bring about this change. In the Hegelian system, conflict is essential. Furthermore, for Hegel and systems based on Hegel, the state is absolute. The state requires complete obedience from the individual citizen. An individual does not exist for himself in these so-called organic systems, but only to perform a role in the operation of the state. He finds freedom only in obedience to the state. There was no freedom in Hitler's Germany. There is no freedom for the individual under Marxism. Neither will there be in the New World Order. And if it sounds like George Orwell's 1984, it is. In brief, the state is supreme, and conflict is used to bring about the ideal society. Individuals find freedom in obedience to the rulers. So who or what is the state? Obviously, it's a self-appointed elite. It is interesting that Fichte, who developed these ideas before Hegel, was a Freemason, almost certainly Illuminati, and certainly was promoted by the Illuminati. For example, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, or Goethe, Goethe, Aberris in the Illuminati Code, pushed Fichte or Fitch for an appointment at Jena University. Furthermore, the Illuminati principle that the end justifies the means, a principle that Quigley scores as immoral and used both by the group and the order, is rooted in Hegel. Even the anonymous Yale student who wrote the verse in Memorandum 3 observed this principle at work on the Yale campus. This, then, is a vital part of our explanation of the order. When its co-founder, William Russell, was in Germany in 1831 until 1832, there was no way he could have provided Hegelian theory and discussion. There was no way he could have avoided Hegelian theory and discussion. It was the talk of the campus. It swept intellectual Germany like a Pac-Man craze. Most Americans haven't heard of it, and those who have don't want to hear any more about it. Why? Because its assumptions are completely at variance with our sense of individual freedom and constitutional guarantees. Most of us believe the state exists to serve the individual, not vice versa. The order believes the opposite to most of us. That is crucial to understanding what they are about. So any discussion between left and right, while essential to promote change, is never allowed to develop into a discussion along the lines of, say, Jeffersonian democracy, i.e., the best government is the least government. The discussion and the funding is always towards more state power, use of state power, and away from individual rights. So it doesn't matter from the viewpoint of the order whether it is termed left, right, democratic, republican, secular, or religious, so long as the discussion is kept within the framework of the state and the power of the state. This is the common feature between the People just won't leave me alone today. They're going to have to wait. We're almost done. This is the common feature between the seemingly dissimilar positions taken by members. They have a higher common objective in which a clash of ideas is essential. So long as rights of the individual are not introduced into the discussion, the clash of ideas generates the conflict necessary for change. As the objective is also global control, an emphasis is placed on global thinking, i.e., internationalism or globalism. This is done through world organizations and world law. The great contribution of the Tafts to the order was on the world court system and world law, to the internationalist aspect of the new world order. And that's the end of chapter 6. Okay, we're done here. Apparently, I have some errands to run. So my apologies for the numerous interruptions throughout this video, but as per usual, I hope you learned something from this video. I hope there is a positive takeaway of some sort, and if so, I hope you share that with your friends, family members, co-workers, anybody and everybody you so choose. And as usual, guys, have a beautiful and blessed day, night, evening, wherever you find yourselves in this topsy-turvy, crazy fucking world of ours. All right, I'm out of here. Deuces.